Shabbat Shalom. Do you remember when the kids were little and you were at the zoo? Or maybe it was a concert. Or maybe you were traveling somewhere and you went to go see something and you noticed that your child couldn't quite get a good view of what was going on. So what did you do? You picked him up. You picked her up. And now, if you're like me, sometimes you enjoyed that moment of eye to eye with your kid, and then you realized if you really wanted your child to see better, if you really wanted to let that kid see even farther, what did you do? You picked him up, you picked her up, and you put her on your shoulders. Do you remember how wonderful that was? How much joy you felt in that moment that you could give your child that kind of vision, that kind of sight. All the while, they kicked you in the chest over and over again, put their hands on your face, played with your ears. They're beautiful memories, though, aren't they? With the kids on your shoulders. Our children can see so much better than we can see. Our children have a vision that we could never imagine. And that's because our kids are standing on the shoulders of giants. We today have such better vision, have such better sight than they could have in previous generations. Because we stand on the shoulders of giants. Now, it is the older generation's job to lift up the kids so that they can see. And it is the kids' job, it is the next generation's role to look even farther than their parents or grandparents could ever imagine. And it's also the role of that next generation to not just look out and look beyond, but every now and again to look down, too, to give thanks, because we stand on the shoulders of giants. Now, of course, this week I'm thinking of Parashat Hayyei Starr. Here, as I mentioned earlier, we mark the deaths of Abraham and Sarah, and the transition of leadership to Isaac and Rebekah. Abraham and Sarah were not perfect people in the Torah. They had their faults. The whole story of Hagar and Ishmael is problematic. It's really hard to read. There was not once but twice that Abraham passed Sarah off as his sister rather than his wife to save his own life. It's problematic. It's really hard to read. And then, of course, at the very end of last week's Torah portion, we read about the binding of Isaac, when Abraham nearly sacrificed his son. It's problematic and it's very hard to read. Now, perhaps, maybe you don't know, but why is it that God waited until Isaac was 38 years old? According to the Midrash, God waited until Isaac was 38 years old before God told Abraham to sacrifice his son. The answer, of course, because if God told Abraham to sacrifice Isaac as a teenager, it wouldn't be much of a sacrifice. I'm doing my best up here. But of course, when we look at Avram and Starr, when we look at our patriarchs and our matriarchs, we see their incredible devotion, I would tell you, to probably three primary values: faith, justice, and compassion. And if we look at Abraham and Sarah and we look at all that they accomplished, yes, they were imperfect. And that's among the beautiful aspects of our Torah, because they were imperfect and we can learn from their imperfections just as much as we can learn from their strengths. But boy, did they have strengths. Here were people profoundly, wholly committed to faith, to justice, and to compassion. The world is a better place today because we stand on their shoulders. The world is a better place today because we saw that the evil that they countered, that they challenged, we saw the violence and the desperation and the idolatry in their day, and how they stood up to it with faith and with justice and compassion, and we stand now on their shoulders to see even farther, to present an even greater vision of what this world can be when we practice faith and justice and compassion. The world has come so far because we stand on the shoulders of giants. But I also think today of our Rebbitzin and our leader, our friend, our teacher, Lipsa Groner, now of blessed memory. And I think of Rabbi Groner. And I think of that generation of leadership, some of whom are here today. Leonard Baruch, a man with incredible vision. And I look around this room and I see so many of our leaders of that generation. And I look around and I see leaders of the next generation who stood on the shoulders of those giants. And I look at the kids who are going to stand on our shoulders, who are going to see even farther, who are going to have a vision even greater than we can imagine. And I'll say to the children, we are looking to you. We're counting on you. We are doing our very best with our imperfections to lift you up, not just to hear, but to hear, so that you can see even farther, so that you can have an even greater vision than we could ever imagine. Now, we might not always agree, but we honor that you can see better than we can. And as long as you remember the values that we're trying to impart to you of faith, of justice, of compassion, then we know that whatever vision you see will lead us to even greater places than we can imagine. We also ask of you one more thing. Every now and again, look down and remember that you are standing on the shoulders of giants. Here we are now in the 21st century, and we're living through difficult times. We're living through incredibly difficult times. And as I look at the leadership of this generation and the next generation and even the one after that, I see people devoted with their entire beings to justice and to compassion. But if I could give a little nudge, if I could give a little tweak, if I could give a little readjustment on our shoulders, I would say two things. One, faith matters. There is strength in faith. Within faith also is embedded the idea of humility, profound humility. And if there's anything that I can say about our leaders today, boy, are they lacking in humility. And could use that faith that leads to humility. And I would encourage you and I would remind you every now and again, in the midst of your great vision for the world, remember to look down and look back and know that you are standing on the shoulders of giants. Today, in this week of Parashat Hayyei Starr, let us remember the ancestors who came before, who in the midst of great suffering and who in the midst of difficult times stood up for the values of faith and justice and compassion, and who put us on their shoulders so that we could have an even greater vision. And now may we, older adults, have the koyach, have the strength and the wisdom to lift up the next generation onto our shoulders and to acknowledge that they will have an even greater vision than we could have ever imagined. May they be blessed with the vision of faith and justice and compassion. And may they remember, may we remember, that we stand on the shoulders of giants, and we should give thanks. Adonai oz yamo yitain, Adonai yivarech et amo v'shalom. May God bless us with the strength to do what is good and what is right in the eyes of the Lord. May God bless us with the strength to lift those kids now bigger than we are, even higher on our shoulders. And may God bless us all with peace. And we say together, Amen. And to the giants among us, thank you.